In a significant development, Hamas has received what's described as a final draft for a ceasefire aiming to end hostilities in Gaza. This comes amidst fierce political opposition within Israel, where the finance minister has threatened the government collapse over any deal.
Almost a year and a half later, the ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas may finally see the light of the day.
There is a distinct possibility that we can get this deal done this week before President Biden leaves office. But as you say, we've been here before, we've been close before, and haven't gotten across the finish line, so I can't make any promises or predictions.
As per the draft proposal, both sides agreed Hamas would release 3 hostages on the first day of the agreement, after which Israel would begin withdrawing the troops from the populated areas. 7 days later, Hamas would release 4 additional hostages, and Israel would allow displaced people in the south to return to the north, but only on foot via the coastal road. Cars, animal-drawn carts, and trucks would be permitted to cross through a passage adjacent to Saleh Adin Road, monitored by an X-ray machine operated by a Qatari Egyptian technical security team. The agreement includes provisions for Israeli forces to remain in the Philadelphia corridor and maintain an 800-meter buffer zone along with eastern and northern borders during the first phase, which will last 42 days. Israel also agreed to release 1,000 Palestinian prisoners, including 190 who have been serving sentences of 15 years or more. In exchange, Hamas will release 34 hostages. Negotiations for the second and third phase of the agreement would begin on the 16th day of the ceasefire.
هذه مفاوضات المسألة ما زالت في حالة سيولة ولكننا يعني متفائلون بشكل خاص.
The new impetus comes after threats by US President-elect Donald J. Trump that hell will break loose if no deal is reached by the time he's inaugurated on January 20th.
If those hostages aren't back, I don't want to hurt your negotiation. If they're not back by the time I get into office, all hell will break out in the Middle East. And it will not be good for Hamas, and it will not be good, frankly, for anyone. All hell will break out. I don't have to say anymore, but that's what it is.
The fresh round of talks has raised the hopes of families of hostages as well as residents of Gaza who have been under intense aerial bombardment. While the ceasefire talks are progressing, intense protests continue in Israel, demanding Prime Minister Netanyahu to accept the proposal. But Netanyahu is also facing backlash from his right-wing colleagues in the government.
העסקה המתרקמת היא עסקת כניעה לחמאס. אני קורא לחברי, השר בצלאל סמוטריץ', לחבור אליי וביחד לשתף פעולה נגד העסקה המתרקמת. לעוצמה יהודית אין את הכוח למנוע את העסקה לבד. אבל ביחד אנחנו יכולים ללכת לראש הממשלה ולהודיע לו שאם הוא מעביר את העסקה, אנחנו פורשים מהממשלה.
The coming hours and days will be very crucial to determine whether these talks will yield any progress or the cycle of violence will continue. But all this while, the eyes will be on the negotiators to see whether diplomacy can triumph over this conflict. In Delhi, Mohammad Ghazali for NDTV.
Well, joining us now are Aran Lev, the Israeli author and journalist, Omer Anas, he's a professor in Turkey. We're also joined by Dr. Shubhda Chaudhry, foreign affairs expert. Thank you all very much for being with us. Aran Lev, let's just go through the proposal as we know. It may turn out to be slightly different, but at the moment it seems that there'd be hostage release for 33 Israeli hostages, including women, the children, elderly, and the sick, and that there would be in exchange up to 1,000 Palestinian prisoners who would be released. But that exact number unclear at this stage. Do you believe that this is almost a done deal at this stage? Aran Lev, go ahead. All right, we don't seem to have him. Let me go across to Omer Anas. Omer Anas, do you believe that this solution is the way forward to a peace?
Indeed, it is not a sustainable peace model as of now, because this is just to stop the bloodshed at this moment. But as Hamas has been pressing demands that should ensure the complete withdrawal of the Israeli soldiers from entire Gaza. And that is not going to happen very soon. And I think that the Israelis would maintain their right to attack again and again, even for the period of the three-staged ceasefire. So there will be some brief violations of ceasefire, I think. But however, I think this is going to stay for some time because President Trump has clearly warned all the sides that this ceasefire must be completed before he's going to join in the power. So what I think is that President Trump is going to focus on his previous Abraham Accord, and for that he needs allies, especially the UAE and Saudi Arabia, on his side. And that is not going to happen before the ceasefire is there.
Aran Lev, if you can hear me now, given the opposition that Prime Minister Netanyahu faces in Israel, could you give us a sense of the pressure he is under to not accept such a deal and to keep on the offensive against Hamas?
Yeah, okay, so Netanyahu is now facing a hostile political class, mainly from the right-wing politicians and also hostile bureaucratic class. And in a way, even in the pro-governmental TV channels and TV news, people say if it was not Netanyahu, we would go violently to the streets against this flow deal, because Netanyahu lost the story, he lost the paradigm, he promised that the only way to bring back the hostages is to win in the battlefield. And now with Trump as the new president, he doesn't have many options. He has to be obedient to Trump and to give Palestinian prisoners, to get hostages back. And even later on, I don't think Netanyahu can be very disobedient to the American policy. And if Trump doesn't want a new war in Gaza, there will be no new war in Gaza.
Okay. David K. Johnston, you would have heard what Donald Trump had to say, saying that all hell would break loose if Hamas didn't listen. What exactly does Donald Trump have in mind?
I have no idea, nor does Donald Trump, because Donald doesn't operate from policy. He operates from whatever's in his head at the moment. But I think the key question about this ceasefire is this is essentially, at least as reported by news organizations, the same deal Benjamin Netanyahu could have had 8 months ago. I think that reflects very poorly on the prime minister, who, a number of countries want him tried as a war criminal for what they see as the grossly excessive use of force against children, the disabled, women, and the elderly.
Shubhda Chaudhry, the fact of the matter is, on the ground in Gaza, there is a humanitarian disaster. So in as much as we're talking about an Israeli withdrawal, ultimately, how important is it now for a truce to end, not just because it potentially signals an end to Hamas, but it's also directly linked to bringing relief to millions who've been impacted?
Thank you so much, Vishnu, for calling me. First of all, Hamas has actually unofficially said that they have accepted the draft, though officially Mohammed Sinwar, who is the head of the military wing, still has to say yes or no. Second, both the envoys of Trump and Biden, which are Steve Witkoff and Brett McCurk, are there in Doha talking about the ceasefire negotiations with Qatar and Egypt, who also have to take into consideration their own realistic geopolitical ambitions when they're talking about the ceasefire, because they share the borders and many kind of tacit alliances. Thirdly, Trump itself, he's at a Mar-a-Lago event today. The head of religious Zionism, Ohad Tal, basically said that Trump should avoid this kind of wokeism and not take over the deal. Now, turning about this deal, whatever we call it, a truce deal, a hostage negotiation deal, a ceasefire deal, whatever the etymology of it is just a hostage negotiation deal that could have happened way back in November when 123 hostages were released. Right now, for every 5 female Israeli soldiers, 30 Israeli prisoners, Palestinian prisoners with 30 plus serving life sentence will be released. We don't know if it is Marwan Barghouti or Dr. Abu Husam Abu Safia. But the point of the question is, there was no necessity, there was no immediate reason then in November or today to delay the deal, whatever we may call it. There have been 87 Palestinians killed from yesterday till today.
Right.
Right
so
now,
you feel
Yemen,
that
the
deal
Houthis in Yemen,
could have taken place earlier on.
way long before.
Right. Aran Lev, let me come back to you and ask you this. Is there a sense now in Israel that the terror that you face has essentially ended? We know what's happened to Hezbollah. We know about the strikes that have taken place in Syria. There's been a regime change in Syria as well. Hamas has been hammered on the ground. And therefore, the question is, do you believe that, it is time for a peace deal or to get out of Gaza because your primary targets, the terrorist groups, have been dealt with?
So unlike in Lebanon, when we had we had a consensus that we want to go to the international border, Hezbollah is attacking us, and therefore Hezbollah needs to be defeated. While when we speak about Gaza, we have a right-wing fringe that wants to have settlements in Gaza. Bibi doesn't want it, but some ministers in his cabinet do want it. And also, when we speak about Gaza, it is not really clear what is the political solution, even according to this right-wing government. So, in a way, both sides before Trump believed that they will get a better deal. The Palestinians believe that via Hague, via the international community, they will get a better deal with Israel because Israel will be seen as an entity that does, mass murder and genocide and so on. While in Israel, Netanyahu believed that via the tanks and Air Force, he will get the hostages back. And now that Trump is back to office, the big demerit of Trump, that you never know what he will do next, it became a huge merit because Palestinians are afraid of him because they know that Hague is nothing when Trump is in office. And also Netanyahu knows that among the Israeli right-wing voters, Trump is hugely popular. So Trump is like the big player, and this is a reason now to be optimistic.
Okay. David K. Johnston, the larger issue as far as Israel is concerned are presently also attacks coming in from Yemen, missile strikes, and also the entire issue of Yemen, of Iran. In as much as there may be a peace deal on the ground in West Asia, how is the central concern of no agreement or peace between Israel and Iran the core issue which remains unanswered?
Well, it's difficult to imagine any peace between Tehran and Israel. That seems beyond the pale. On the other hand, I think Netanyahu has created a long-term new problem because his meat axe approach in Gaza has clearly created new radicals, new generations of people that are going to be hostile to Israel. And he runs the very serious risk here that the rest of the modern world will at some point treat Israel as a pariah state, the way it did South Africa 40 years ago.
All right. Omer Anas, would you agree that there are new radicals who've been created and that even if there is a lull in the violence, assuming this peace deal goes forward, West Asia will fundamentally remain insecure, primarily because of the differences which exist between Iran and Israel?
Anyone who understands West Asia closely, they know very well that this issue, Arab-Israeli issue and Palestinian issue, is a very charged issue where religion and geostrategic issues, concerns are coming together. And there are so many religious sentiments that are attached of 1.5 billion Muslims in the world, a lot of Jewish people and Christian people. So as long as Israel thinks that they can use occupation and destruction as a tool for their security, I think they are still making grave mistakes by using that tool. And by having a negotiated outcome, a peaceful, sustainable outcome, whether it is going to be in the form of two-state solution or in the form of what President Trump is going to proceed for the Abraham Accord, the only way to sustainable peace, lasting peace, is a negotiated outcome, for which I think the Netanyahu government and personally Prime Minister Netanyahu is not capable of, because he does not believe in the idea of peace at all.
Okay. Dr. Shubhda Chaudhary, last word to you. You've gone through the proposals. Do you believe that this is it? It is going to go through, or there are aspects over here which Israel might still disagree with?
The 42-day timeline that has been given in this deal, we look at, the Israel-Lebanon ceasefire deal, which was the 60-day deal, which would have finished on 26th of January 2025, has not been followed. That is the first blueprint. The second is that the 42-day deal, which has been so-called signed, as I said, it has not been ratified officially as of now, though the health ministry in Israel is ready with all the, the victims coming and the hostages, which is very much indeed necessary for them. Thirdly, we also have to think about what relationship CIA and Mossad are going to have. David Lammy, the foreign minister of UK right now, is in Israel, and there's a UK spy plane coming off from Cyprus all the time over Gaza for intelligence gathering. So the third and the last most important thing is that if we look into the longevity of this deal, technically looking into all the funding, lobbying, and the certain kind of indirect positioning that is happening at the front internally in the domestic politics for Netanyahu, at the same time, he's not attending Trump's inauguration. At the same time, the generational shift that Trump's cabinet is also having from Biden's cabinet. One can only hope for that there is a humanitarian solution, though I do not think that this deal is the humanitarian solution, because there's no jurisdiction of any legal process over whether the ceasefire will be implemented or not. And ceasefire does not mean cessation of hostilities in the terminology of peacekeeping, according to whatever is happening as we see in Middle East.
All right, I'd like to thank you all very much for joining us. Let's just hope that there is some sort of peace, there is some sort of relief to millions on the ground in Gaza, more humanitarian aid gets in, and hopefully the violence, at least for now, comes to an end.